if you stay until the very end of this video, you will walk away with real English phrases you can use tomorrow morning, a mini quiz to test yourself, and the confidence boost you have been looking for. So do not click away, because this conversation is going to change how you think about learning English forever. And I am your teacher, Amelia. Welcome to English Conversation Amelia.
I have been watching your channel for 3 weeks now, and I already feel so different about English. Like something clicked inside my brain, and I thought, I have to come and have a real conversation with you, because just watching was not enough for me anymore.
That is honestly one of the most beautiful things a student has ever said to me. And I want you to know that the fact that you noticed that shift inside yourself, that click you described, that is actually the most important moment in any language learning journey, because it means your brain has started accepting English as a real tool, not just a school subject.
But why does that happen for some people and not for others? Because I have friends who have been studying English for years, like actual years, with textbooks and grammar books and everything, and they still freeze the second someone speaks to them in English. So what is the difference?
That is such a smart question, and I love that you are asking it this early in our conversation, because the answer actually explains everything about how language learning works. The difference is not intelligence. It is not even hard work. It is something called comprehensible input, which basically means you need to hear and understand English in context, not just memorize rules in isolation.
Comprehensible input? Okay, I have heard that phrase before, but I never really understood what it means in real life. Like, what does that actually look like when I am sitting at home trying to practice my English on a Tuesday evening after work?
Oh, I love that you said Tuesday evening after work, because that is exactly the situation most of my students are in. They are tired, they've had a long day, maybe they had a difficult meeting or a long commute, and now they're supposed to sit down and learn a language. So let me give you a very real example of comprehensible input in that exact moment. Yes, please. Because usually on Tuesday evenings, I just end up watching YouTube videos in my own language and telling myself I will do English tomorrow, which obviously never happens the way I plan. And that is completely normal and nothing to feel guilty about. But here is what I want you to try instead. On that Tuesday evening, instead of switching to your native language completely, you put on an English cooking video or an English vlog, something visual and easy, and you do not try to understand every word. You just let the English wash over you while you relax. That is comprehensible input in real life. That actually sounds doable. Like, I genuinely thought learning English had to feel like studying, like sitting at a desk with a notebook and a timer. But you're saying I can literally lie on my sofa and still be learning? Absolutely. And I want to be very clear about this, because it is something people misunderstand all the time. Passive listening while relaxed is not as powerful as active practice, but it is 100% still learning. And for someone who is tired after work, it is 1,000 times better than doing nothing, because your brain is still processing patterns, rhythm, vocabulary, all of it.
Okay, but here is where I get frustrated. I will watch something in English, I will think I understand it, and then someone speaks to me in real life and my brain goes completely blank, like a total whiteout, and I cannot get a single word out, which makes me feel so stupid.
First of all, you are not stupid. And I say that not just to be nice. I say it because what you are describing is an extremely well documented psychological phenomenon called language anxiety. And it affects even highly intelligent people, even people who have been speaking a second language for years. The blank mind feeling is your nervous system going into a mild stress response, not your brain failing you.
So it is actually a stress thing? Because now that you say that, I can feel it. Like whenever someone starts speaking English to me, especially a native speaker, my heart rate goes up and I can feel my face getting hot, and I just want to run away from the conversation.
Oh, yes. And the fact that you can identify those physical sensations is actually a huge advantage because the first step to managing language anxiety is awareness. And most people never get there. They just keep experiencing the panic without understanding what is happening. But you can already describe your body's response, which means you can start working with it instead of against it.
So, how do I work with it? Like, practically? Because I have a meeting next month with some international colleagues, and there will be native English speakers there, and I am already nervous about it, even though it is 4 weeks away.
Perfect. Let us use that meeting as a real life case study for this whole conversation. Because everything we talk about today is going to connect back to that moment when you walk into that room. And the first thing I want to tell you is that preparation is the single greatest weapon against language anxiety. And I do not mean memorizing a script.
What do you mean then? Because I was literally planning to write down things I might say and memorize them. Is that wrong?
It is not wrong exactly, it is just incomplete. Because if you memorize a script and the conversation goes slightly off track, which conversations always do, you will feel even more lost than if you had prepared differently. So instead of memorizing sentences, I want you to memorize topics, chunks of language, flexible phrases that you can mix and match.
Oh, like building blocks instead of a whole pre built wall. Is that what you mean? Because that actually makes so much more sense to me visually.
That is a beautiful metaphor, and I am going to steal it from my future students, if you do not mind. Yes, exactly, like building blocks. Because when you have individual blocks, phrases like, that is a really interesting point, or could you say a little more about that? Or I see what you mean, and I think you can build any response you need in real time.
I actually use some of those phrases already, but I never thought of them as tools. I thought I was just being polite. But you're saying they're actually buying me time to think in English?
Yes, and that is one of the most powerful secrets of confident English speakers. Native speakers use filler phrases and thinking expressions constantly. Things like, well, or that is a great question. Let me think. Or I would say that these are not weaknesses in conversation. They are social glue, and using them makes you sound more natural, not less.
So I have been feeling embarrassed about saying and well in English, thinking it makes me sound unsure. But actually, native speakers do it all the time.
All the time. And there's actually research that shows native speakers produce filler words at a rate of about 6 per minute in natural conversation. So if you're in a meeting and you say, well, that is interesting, let me think about that for a second. You're not sounding weak. You're sounding like a fluent, thoughtful communicator.
This is the kind of thing nobody ever told me in school. Like, I spent years learning grammar rules, present perfect versus past simple, active versus passive voice, and not once did a teacher say, by the way, everyone says a lot, and that is totally fine.
And that frustration you feel is completely valid because traditional English education has a lot to answer for. It has produced millions of people who can write a grammatically perfect essay, but cannot order a coffee in English without their hands shaking. The education system prioritized tests over communication, and it has left so many learners feeling broken when they are absolutely not.
That is exactly how I feel. Broken. Like I know the rules, but I cannot use them. It's like knowing how a car engine works theoretically, but never having sat in the driver's seat.
And that is why daily English speaking practice is not just helpful, it is essential. It is the driver's seat. Because you can study grammar for 100 years, but your mouth only learns to speak English by actually speaking English. And your ear only learns to process English by actually listening to it in real, unscripted, natural situations.
So, what does a realistic daily practice look like? Because I work full time, I have family responsibilities, I maybe have 30 minutes a day if I am lucky. Is 30 minutes enough? 30 minutes done consistently every single day is more powerful than 4 hours done once a week. And I say that with complete confidence because language acquisition research supports it overwhelmingly. Consistency beats intensity every time when it comes to building a new language habit in your brain. But what do I do with those 30 minutes? Because sometimes I sit down and I just do not know where to start, and then the 30 minutes pass and I feel like I did nothing useful.
Let me give you a specific 30-minute daily structure that you can use starting tomorrow. The first 10 minutes is your input time. You listen to something in English, a podcast, a YouTube video, a news clip, something at your level. The second 10 minutes is your output time. You speak out loud. You describe your day. You summarize what you just heard. You talk to yourself. And the final 10 minutes is your reflection time. You write down 2 or 3 new words or phrases you want to remember. That structure is so simple. I feel a bit embarrassed that I was not doing something like that already. Because when you say it like that, it sounds so logical and achievable. Do not be embarrassed at all. Most people who are learning a language have never been taught how to learn a language. They have been taught English, but nobody taught them the actual process of acquisition. And that is a completely different skill set that takes time to develop. Okay, so the talking to myself part, I tried that once and I felt absolutely ridiculous. Like I was sitting in my kitchen narrating making breakfast in English and I felt like I was going crazy. Is that a normal feeling? It is one of the most common things my students tell me, and I find it absolutely delightful every time. Yes, you will feel ridiculous at first, and that feeling is actually a very good sign because it means you are doing it right. You are pushing your brain into an uncomfortable new territory, and discomfort in language learning almost
always means growth. So the embarrassment is actually progress? That is honestly the most reassuring reframe I have ever heard, because I need to hear that the uncomfortable feeling is not a sign to stop.
Exactly. And let me give you more practical things to narrate, because making breakfast is a great start. You could narrate your commute. You could describe the people around you at the coffee shop. You could explain a problem you need to solve at work as if you are presenting it to your international colleagues. All of that is real, high-quality speaking practice.
The work problem one is interesting to me. So I would actually explain a real work situation in English out loud to myself? Like rehearsing for the actual meeting?
Yes. And this is something professional athletes, musicians, surgeons, pilots, they all do versions of this. Mental and verbal rehearsal before high-stakes situations. And for your upcoming international meeting, spending even 5 minutes a day describing a work challenge in English out loud will dramatically reduce your anxiety when the real moment comes.
I am going to start doing that tonight. Like, I have a project I need to present, and I am going to explain it in English to my empty living room and just see what happens, even if I mess up every sentence.
That attitude right there is what separates learners who succeed from those who stay stuck. Because the willingness to be bad at something temporarily is the most essential ingredient in becoming good at it eventually. And most people are so afraid of being bad that they never even try, which means they never improve. But what do I do when I am speaking and I hit a wall? Like, I know what I want to say in my language, but the English word just is not coming. Do I stop? Do I switch languages? What is the rule?
There is no rule, but there is a technique. It is called circumlocution, and it is the art of talking around a word you do not know. And it is actually one of the most important skills in fluent communication. Instead of stopping, you describe the concept. It is like a machine that, or it is the feeling when you, and native speakers will almost always understand you and often supply the word you were looking for.
Oh. So I do not need to know every single word to communicate the idea? I can describe around it and still have a successful conversation?
Completely. And honestly, circumlocution is not a crutch for language learners. It is a real communication skill that even native speakers use every day. How many times have you heard someone say, "What is that thing called?" You know, the thing you use when. That is circumlocution, and it is entirely normal and effective.
I do that in my own language all the time. I never thought about the fact that I could just do the same thing in English instead of freezing up.
And that is the key insight right there. The communication strategies you use in your native language are transferable. You are already a skilled communicator in one language, which means you have the communication brain. You just need to wire it to English. And that wiring happens through practice and exposure.
Let me ask you something about pronunciation, because that is another thing that makes me really nervous. I have a strong accent, and I worry that people will not understand me or will judge me. Is that a realistic fear?
It is a common fear, but let me give you some important context. There is a difference between accent and clarity. An accent is the unique music of how you speak a language based on your background. And having an accent is not a problem. It is beautiful. Clarity is whether people can understand your meaning. And that is what actually matters in communication.
So, I do not need to sound like a British or American person to be a good English speaker?
Absolutely not. And in fact, trying to completely eliminate your accent is not only nearly impossible for adult language learners, it is also unnecessary. English is a global language with hundreds of accents. Indian English, Nigerian English, Brazilian English, Chinese English, all are valid. All are used in international business. All communicate effectively. And anyone who judges your accent rather than your message has the problem, not you.
That is honestly something I needed to hear. Because I've spent so much energy trying to sound like a specific type of English speaker, and it has just made me more self-conscious, not less.
And this is something I feel very strongly about. The goal of English learning is connection and communication. It is the ability to share ideas, to understand others, to participate in the global conversation. It is not about performing an identity that is not yours. Your accent is part of who you are, and it deserves to be in your English.
But what about pronunciation mistakes that actually cause misunderstandings? Because I know that sometimes I mispronounce words and people look confused and I have to repeat myself, and it is embarrassing.
That is a very fair distinction. And there are certain sounds and word stresses that are worth focusing on because they do affect clarity. For example, word stress in English is very important. The difference between record as a noun and record as a verb, or present as a noun and present as a verb, these stress patterns change meaning and are worth practicing deliberately.
I never even thought about word stress as something to study separately. I just tried to copy the whole word. But you're saying the emphasis is actually a separate thing I need to pay attention to?
Yes, and the best way to practice this is shadowing, which means you listen to a native or fluent speaker say something, then you immediately repeat it, trying to match not just the words, but the rhythm, the rise and fall, the stress, the speed. It is like learning the music of English, not just the lyrics.
Shadowing? I have heard of this, but I thought it was just for advanced learners. Can someone at my level do it?
Anyone can shadow. The key is to pick content at the right level. If you are at a B1 level, you shadow B1 content. You do not start with fast-speaking comedians or complex political speeches. You start with clear, measured speech. Maybe a teacher explaining something, maybe a friendly podcast, and you build up gradually as your ear and mouth get more comfortable.
What level do you think I am at based on our conversation today? Because I genuinely do not know. I feel like I swing between feeling quite good about my English and feeling like a complete beginner depending on the day.
Based on how you have been expressing yourself today, asking complex questions, understanding nuanced answers, using metaphors like the building blocks one, I would estimate you are somewhere around B1 to B2, which is genuinely a strong foundation. And that swinging feeling you described is completely normal at that level because you are in what researchers call the intermediate plateau.
The intermediate plateau? That sounds terrifying. What is it?
It is the stage where learners have enough English to get by, but not enough to feel truly fluent. And it is the stage where most people give up because progress feels slow. Because you are no longer learning obvious new things every day like you were as a beginner. And because you can communicate, but you still feel limited. It is the hardest stage, but it is also the most important one to push through. How do I push through it? Because I recognize that feeling completely. I feel like I have been at okay English for a long time, and I cannot seem to get to good English. The way through the plateau is deliberate challenge. You need to consistently expose yourself to English that is just slightly above your current level. Not so hard you understand nothing, but hard enough that you are stretching. This is called I+1, a concept from language researcher Stephen Krashen, where I is your current level and +1 means the next step up.
So I should not be watching videos that are too easy for me, even if they feel comfortable?
Comfortable is good for confidence building. And you need some of that. But for actual growth, you need some productive struggle. Maybe 80% of your input should be comfortably understandable, and 20% should be challenging. And that 20% is where the real linguistic stretching happens.
That is like going to the gym. You need some warm-up exercises, and then you need the heavier weights. You cannot just do warm-ups every day and expect to get stronger.
That is such a perfect analogy, and you keep making them so effortlessly. And yes, English learning is very much like fitness. Consistency, progressive challenge, rest, enjoyment of the process. All of the same principles apply. And people who treat language learning like a fitness journey tend to succeed much faster than those who treat it like a test to pass.
I am starting to feel genuinely excited about this in a way I have not felt in a long time. Like, I feel like I have a map now instead of just wandering around in the dark.
And that is exactly what I want you to carry out of this conversation. Not just information, but a genuine sense of direction. Because so many English learners are working incredibly hard, but without a clear strategy. And strategy is the multiplier that turns effort into results.
Can I tell you something? I almost did not come to this conversation today because I was worried my English was not good enough to have it, which is kind of ironic when you think about it.
That is not ironic at all. That is the most human thing you could have said. And I want every single person watching or listening to this to hear what you just shared. Because the fear of not being good enough to practice is the number one thing that keeps people from practicing, which means the fear creates the very problem it is afraid of.
That is actually a really profound observation. The fear of being bad at English stops you from practicing, and not practicing keeps you bad at English. So the fear is actually creating the thing you are afraid of.
Exactly. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the only way to break that cycle is to act despite the fear, to show up for the conversation even when your English feels shaky,
to send the email even when you are not sure about the grammar, to speak up in the meeting even when your heart is pounding. Because each time you do, you prove to your brain that the situation is survivable and the anxiety gradually reduces.
So it is not about eliminating the fear. It is about doing the thing anyway and letting the fear reduce naturally over time through experience?
Precisely. And this is true in psychology broadly. Exposure therapy works because the brain learns through experience, not through thinking. You cannot think your way out of language anxiety. You have to experience your way out of it. One conversation, one meeting, one awkward moment at a time.
I wish someone had told me this when I was in school. I spent so long waiting to feel ready before I would speak English, and ready never came because I was never practicing.
And it is never too late. That is the beautiful truth about language learning. The brain retains neuroplasticity well into adulthood. And while children learn languages differently, adults have real advantages. We have larger vocabularies to connect new words to. We have world experience that makes content meaningful. And we have the metacognitive awareness to understand our own learning process.
Wait, adults have advantages over children in language learning? I always thought children were just naturally better and adults were fighting biology.
Children have advantages in accent acquisition and in the effortless absorption of patterns. But adults outperform children in vocabulary growth rate, in reading comprehension development, and in the ability to use grammar explanations to accelerate learning. So both groups have advantages. But the idea that adult language learning is a losing battle against biology is simply not supported by the research. Every time I think I know something about language learning, you flip it on its head. I feel like I have been operating on so many myths. That is actually the most common experience my students have. They come in with a head full of learning myths, and they leave with a much clearer and more compassionate picture of what language learning actually involves. And that clarity alone tends to make an enormous difference to their progress. What are the biggest myths you see? Because I want to identify which ones I have been believing. The biggest ones I see every day. Number one, you need to be grammatically perfect to communicate effectively, which is false. Number two, you need to live in an English-speaking country to become fluent, which is false, thanks to the internet. Number three, if you have not learned English by a certain age, you have missed your window, which is false. And number four, fluency means never making mistakes, which is spectacularly false because even native speakers make grammatical errors constantly.
I have believed at least 3 of those, especially the one about making mistakes. I have been treating every error as evidence that I am failing, rather than evidence that I am learning.
And shifting that mindset is genuinely transformational. Because when you start seeing errors as data instead of failure, you start being curious about them instead of ashamed. You start asking
why did I say that wrong? Instead of, why am I so bad at this? And that curiosity is what drives rapid improvement.
So, the right response to making an error in English is to be curious about it?
Yes. Be curious, be gentle, and then practice the correct version. Not obsessively, not with self-punishment, but with the same lightness you would bring to learning any new skill. Imagine if you were learning to cook and you burnt something. You would not conclude that you were a fundamentally bad person. You would figure out what went wrong and try again.
That is such a healthy way to think about it. I want to cook better English, not perform perfect English from day one.
Cook better English. I absolutely love that. And I want to circle back to your upcoming meeting before we wrap up, because I want to give you 3 very specific, practical things you can do in the next 4 weeks to prepare.
Yes, please. 3 things I can actually do. Give them to me.
Number 1, every day for 10 minutes, explain your project out loud in English as if you are presenting to your international colleagues. Do not worry about perfection. Just get the ideas flowing in English. Number 2, learn and practice 20 key phrases for meetings. Things like, building on what you said, I would like to raise a point about. Could we come back to that? I completely agree, and I would add. These phrases will be your building blocks in the room. Number 3, watch one video or listen to one podcast in English every day about a topic related to your work, so your brain starts associating English with your professional world, not just a language classroom.
Those are so specific and so doable. I feel like I have been given a genuine training plan rather than vague advice like just watch more English TV.
Just watch more English TV is the just exercise more of language learning advice. Technically true, but utterly unhelpful without structure. And you deserve actual structure because you are a real person with real goals and limited time.
I am going to remember that. Just watch more English TV is the just exercise more of language advice. That is going in my notes.
Before we move to our quiz, I want to say something to everyone who has made it this far in our conversation. You have shown the same dedication today that you need to bring to your daily English practice. Staying with something to the end, being curious, being open. Those qualities will make you a successful English learner if you apply them consistently.
This conversation has genuinely changed how I think about English learning. Not just what to do, but how to feel about the process. I feel less like I am failing and more like I am on a journey that has real direction now.
And that feeling right there, that is worth protecting. Write it down. Remember it for the days when practice feels hard or progress feels invisible. Because those days will come. And having this feeling as an anchor will help you keep going through them.
I will. And I am going to start today, not tomorrow. Right after this conversation, I am going to go explain my work project in English to my empty living room. And I am not going to judge myself for every mistake.
That is the most perfect note to move toward our quiz on. But before we do, I want to ask everyone watching or listening right now to drop a comment below and tell us, what is the biggest English learning challenge you face in your daily life? Whether it is speaking anxiety, vocabulary gaps, pronunciation, grammar confusion, share it.
because your comment helps us make content that actually serves you. And it also helps other learners see that they are not alone in their challenges. So please comment, like this video if it has been useful, and let us get some conversations going in the comments, because this community learns best together.
Yes, and if you have a specific situation coming up where you need to use English, a job interview, a trip abroad, a work meeting like mine, share it in the comments, and maybe Amelia can give advice right there in the replies.
I absolutely will. I read every single comment on this channel and I reply as much as I possibly can, because your real life situations are what inspire the content we create. So your voice genuinely matters here.